Germany, France, and Denmark, nations that once stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States, now find themselves at the forefront of a seismic rebellion. Their target? The inner sanctum of the White House. Their weapon? A full-scale, no-holds-barred trade war set off by Donald Trump's latest tariffs. And the first casualty? Tesla, the once celebrated symbol of innovation, now watching as its empire crumbles in Europe, with sales plummeting by a staggering 76%. Yes, you heard that right, 76%. The king of electric vehicles, Elon Musk, once an untouchable titan, is now watching in disbelief as Europe, the very continent that once heralded his triumphs, turns its back on him. But this isn't merely a corporate setback. This is a powder keg, and it threatens to unravel more than just one company. It could ignite a global economic war. This is more than just a tariff dispute. This is a battle for control of the future of global trade itself. A trade war that could break alliances, shatter economies, and reshape the entire global market. The trade war began innocuously enough. President Trump, in his protectionist push, imposed a 25% tariff on European auto imports, citing national security as the rationale. The justification, as always, was that American industry needed protection from foreign competition. But what followed was far from the predictable consequences that anyone could have foreseen. Within hours of the White House's tariff announcement, the EU struck back. Brussels imposed a 20% tariff on U.S. car exports, and the retaliation didn't end there. The European Commission, already irked by Trump's aggressive foreign policy, cracked down on American tech giants, escalating the conflict into a full-blown trade war that could spiral out of control. In a cruel twist of fate, the ones who would suffer most from this new economic Cold War were the very American companies Trump claimed to protect. German automakers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, while hurt by the tariffs, have the financial muscle to weather the storm. Their market dominance within Europe allows them to absorb the losses without catastrophic consequences. But the situation is entirely different for American giants like Tesla, Ford, and GM. The stakes are staggering. U.S. automakers stand to lose an estimated $7.8 billion annually in revenue from EU tariffs. And for a company like Tesla, whose future in Europe is now in peril, the fallout is devastating. The decline of Tesla in Europe is nothing short of catastrophic. In the first quarter of 2025, the company's market share in Europe collapsed from 14.3% in 2022 to a mere 3.6%. In Germany, its biggest market, the impact was nothing short of apocalyptic, a 76% drop in sales year over year. This is the steepest decline Tesla has faced in Europe since it began its expansion into the continent. But it's not just the tariffs. It's the growing competition that Tesla simply wasn't prepared for. While Musk's company has long enjoyed the advantage of being the market leader, European automakers have stepped up their game. In 2024, while Tesla increased prices by an average of 12% across Europe, legacy European automakers like Volkswagen, Renault, and even Chinese brands like BYD have accelerated their production and offered models at a fraction of Tesla's prices. Volkswagen's ID.4 and Renault's Megane E-Tech now undercut Tesla's flagship Model Y by nearly $9,000 after subsidies. These European EVs have the edge when it comes to price and availability, putting Musk's once dominant position at risk. Meanwhile, Chinese companies like BYD are accelerating their push into Europe, seizing market share that Tesla once dominated. In 2024 alone, BYD's sales in Europe surged by an astonishing 71%, while Tesla's Berlin Gigafactory is running at just 42% capacity, a sharp drop from 85% the year prior. Morgan Stanley analysts have gone as far as to warn that Tesla's first-mover advantage is rapidly evaporating. Legacy automakers, now controlling a staggering 70% of the European EV market, are steadily taking over where Tesla once stood. And then there's Denmark, a country whose political shift serves as a bellwether for the entire European bloc's stance on Tesla. In an extraordinary move, the Danish government announced it would strip Tesla of all government subsidies for 2025. Why? Musk's outspoken alignment with Donald Trump, his controversial ties to China, and his refusal to comply with Europe's rigorous environmental standards. Denmark, which has long been at the forefront of the European electric vehicle revolution, had previously offered generous subsidies for every Tesla sold. But after Musk's vocal opposition to EU climate regulations and his campaign to weaken U.S. emissions standards, Denmark is making it clear: Tesla is no longer welcome. With subsidies removed, Tesla's sales in Denmark have plummeted. From a robust 9.7% market share just a year ago, it's now a mere 1.2% in Q1 2025. This shift is a significant signal. Denmark is not acting in isolation. This is part of a growing European trend. Governments across the continent are choosing to reward automakers that align with EU climate goals and policies, while freezing out those, like Tesla, that don't. For Denmark, where 80% of new car sales are electric, the political ramifications are stark. The government is actively pushing back against Musk's company and signaling that only those who adhere to European climate standards will thrive. Musk's increasingly vocal support for Donald Trump is also costing him. In 2025, a YouGov poll revealed that a shocking 71% of European consumers now view Tesla unfavorably. Musk's decision to host a fundraiser for Trump in Austin, Texas, and Tesla's $3 million donation to GOP lobbying efforts on emission rollbacks have deepened the rift. In Europe, where climate policy is a central issue, Musk's political affiliations are proving to be a massive liability. The market reaction has been swift and brutal. Tesla's stock has already dropped by 27% since Trump's second term began, erasing nearly $180 billion in market value. But it's not just consumer sentiment taking a hit. Institutional investors are pulling out in droves. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, once a staunch supporter of Tesla, slashed its holdings by 40% in the first quarter of 2025, citing concerns over geopolitical risk and regulatory uncertainty. Meanwhile, European pension funds managing over $3 trillion in assets are reconsidering their investments in Tesla, fearing long-term instability in the company's future. Beyond the damage to individual companies, the geopolitical ramifications of this trade war are profound. Denmark's strained relations with the U.S., born from Trump's ill-fated Greenland purchase proposal, have left a lasting mark. What was once a diplomatic faux pas is now a deeply entrenched political rift, with Denmark at the forefront of efforts to decouple Europe from U.S. supply chains. In 2024, trade between Denmark and the U.S. fell by 19%, while exports to China surged by 27%. Copenhagen is now racing to strike new trade agreements with Beijing, signaling a dramatic shift away from Washington's sphere of influence. This isn't just about Denmark. It's part of a broader European realignment. Countries across the EU are prioritizing relationships with China, a strategic pivot away from reliance on the U.S. In fact, the Financial Times reports that Copenhagen is accelerating talks with Beijing to establish new economic ties, signaling a decisive move toward Asia. The economic fallout is staggering. In 2024, EU car exports to the U.S. dropped by 31%, resulting in a $16.4 billion revenue loss. In retaliation, the EU's 20% tariff on U.S. car exports is expected to cost American automakers $7.8 billion annually. As the tariffs escalate, the auto industry, already struggling with supply chain issues, faces further disruption. Mercedes-Benz has canceled a $2 billion expansion in Alabama, citing market instability caused by trade barriers, and Magna International warns that production costs could rise by 12% to 18%, further inflating consumer prices. But the auto industry is just the beginning. U.S. technology companies are also feeling the sting of Europe's retaliation. The European Commission has announced a $40 billion investment in domestic semiconductor production, seeking to reduce reliance on American chipmakers like Intel and Qualcomm. Apple, once the dominant force in the European market, is losing ground. Its market share in Europe has fallen to its lowest level since 2015, as European consumers embrace alternatives from local brands like Fairphone and Nokia. The growing rift between the U.S. and Europe marks the beginning of a profound transformation in global trade. For years, the U.S. has enjoyed a dominant position in both global technology and manufacturing sectors. But as European nations pivot towards self-reliance and increased trade with China, the balance of power is shifting. Europe is rethinking its dependency on American firms, not just in the auto sector, but across technology, defense, and consumer goods. The collapse of Tesla in Europe is just the first domino to fall. As this trade war drags on, it's clear that the U.S.'s economic dominance is no longer as unassailable as it once seemed. With China waiting in the wings to fill the power vacuum, we may be witnessing the dawn of a new economic order, one that could reshape global trade and geopolitics for decades to come. The question now is simple. If the U.S. and Europe continue down this path, who's next? If this trend continues, we could see U.S. tech giants, defense contractors, and even Wall Street itself begin to lose their once unquestioned dominance. The global economic landscape is shifting, and it's happening faster than anyone could have imagined. Stay tuned, because the world of global trade may never be the same again.